From humble beginnings as a tiny grocery store at the turn of the century to becoming South Africa's largest pasta manufacturer was a long road for Fattis and Monis, but no doubt a fascinating one. The company was born in the turbulent days of the Witwatersrand gold rush and is as old as the city of Johannesburg itself. The Moni family came from the city of Lucca in northern Italy, where their hereditary family home, the Casa Moni, has survived to the present day. Back in the 1860s, Giovanni Moni was a successful merchant trading in olive oil, wines, chestnuts, and silk. As was common in Victorian times, he had a large family: 3 girls and 6 boys. The family prospered until around 1895, when Italy was hit by a recession and a disastrous war against the Abyssinians. The Moni boys began to look for greener pastures elsewhere for their livelihood. News of the enormous wealth being discovered in the new Witwatersrand goldfields sent one of the sons, Giuseppe Moni, off to South Africa in 1896, along with many other of his countrymen. To cater for the many hundreds of Italians in this roaring and hard-drinking community, shops and businesses sprang up selling food and specialties they were accustomed to, such as macaroni, olive oil, and wines from Italy. Giuseppe found his first employment attending to wine sales with one of these establishments at 63 Marshall Street. Business came to an abrupt halt with the outbreak of the Boer War in 1899. The war still had 2 years to run, when in 1900, after the occupation of Johannesburg by the British soldiers, a limited number of civilians were allowed to resume trading. Giuseppe Moni set up his own business selling imported goods from Italy, such as Parmesan cheese, Bologna sausages, and pastas. In 1904, 2 other members of the Moni family arrived in South Africa, Giacomo and Pietro, then only 18 years of age. In 1906, Moni Brothers was established as a private family business, and via this company, they controlled all their interests over the coming years. With more Italians than ever working on the Rand, and with the British garrison still stationed in South Africa, the demand for Italian delicacies and beverages had risen sharply, so much so that Moni's established a rifle shooting gallery and Italian club with a membership of some 400 to 500 people. Business flourished until 1913, when rioting broke out. The original Johannesburg station was burnt to the ground, as well as the offices of the Star newspaper. Troops were called out and martial law was proclaimed. Within yards of the premises of the Moni brothers, pick-handled charges by mounted police were in progress and fusillades of bullets were loosed down on Commissioner Street with considerable loss of life. The beginning of World War I in 1914 made the importation of goods practically impossible. This was the deciding factor which persuaded the Moni brothers that it was time for them to start manufacturing their own goods locally and have more control over operations. In 1915, the Italian warehouse company was registered in Johannesburg, and the Monis installed their first machines at the back of their premises on the corner of Fraser and Yeppie Street. Shortly afterwards, they opened a branch in Cape Town. At this point the war was over, but it was to be another 4 years before the company showed its first profits of £1,000. Meanwhile, Luigi Fatti also arrived in South Africa in 1897. He was the sole agent for G.O. and F. Buitoni, which at the time was one of the largest pasta manufacturers in the world. By 1907, Fatti's was incorporated as a limited company with agencies in London and Hamburg. While a friendly rivalry existed between Fatti and the Monis, who were operating only a few yards away, Fatti decided in 1911 to steal a march on this competition by building a big new factory. By 1917, Fatti had grown to such an extent that he had a staff of 31 people with customers as far afield as the Democratic Republic of Congo and Kenya. Rivalry between Fatti and the Monis grew steadily keener by cutting prices, expanding the premises and making trade deals in the surrounding countries. In 1925, a peace treaty was signed between the two families, which resulted in the formation of an entirely new concern, known as the United Macaroni Factories. In 1930, in spite of the difficult times brought about by the Wall Street crash the previous year, the Monis opened their first wheat mill in Cape Town to safeguard the supply of their raw materials. The company was known as the United Macaroni Factories, Belleville. The new wheat mill and macaroni factory were far ahead of anything of its kinds in the country. Its range of products included semolina, infant breakfast foods and ice cream cones, as well as all the pastas. In 1931, Luigi Fatti retired from the board of his company, although he remained chairman. By 1953, the Moni brothers had secured the controlling Fatti interest in the business, and Pietro Moni became managing director. In 1967, the large wheat mill and pasta complex was built in Isando, and 2 years later the old factory in Selby was moved across to the new premises. Tiger Brands took over the controlling interest of the United Macaroni Company in 1982, and rebranded it to Fatti's and Moni's, as many South Africans know and love it today. Under the packaged goods company, Fatti's and Moni's has grown to become one of the best-selling pasta brand in the African continent.